The Australian Border Force has reiterated it can and will cancel visas for those who provide false information, after China lodged a diplomatic protest over the treatment of a Chinese student at Sydney Airport. Key points. The Australian Border Force remains firm on its visa stance despite China's diplomatic protest over a student's cancelled the visa. The Australian Border Force remains firm on its visa stance despite China's diplomatic protest over a student's cancelled the visa. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin urged Australia to stop its actions. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin urged Australia to stop its actions. China's Ministry of Education issued 2 safety warnings for Chinese students in Australia in the past 2 years. China's government made solemn representations to the Australian government over what it says was a recent case of a Chinese student arriving in Sydney only to be interrogated, searched and ultimately have their visa cancelled. According to China's Foreign Ministry, Australian Border Force staff accused the student of failing to disclose previous military training and proceeded to cancel the visa. Beijing claims the officers at Sydney Airport mistook standard military-style drills that all Chinese university students undertake at the outset of their first year on campus for actual military links. Such exercises vary in length from between 2 to 4 weeks and usually involve students in army-style uniforms taking part in marching exercises and other drills. What Australia is doing runs counter to the essence of cultural exchange between China and Australia, said Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin in Beijing. We urge Australia to stop this action which harms others without benefiting itself, he said. Chinese government mouthpiece China Daily earlier published an article claiming a second student had a similar experience a month prior when trying to enter Australia. In both cases, Chinese authorities provided no specific details on the date, age or gender of the students involved. The Australian Border Force declined to comment on individual cases, but defended the general cancellation of visas at the border. The travelling public should be aware that the Australian Border Force can and does cancel visas at the border if a traveller has provided false information, read a statement. We are committed to facilitating the entry of legitimate visa holders into Australia, but will not hesitate to use the powers we have to protect Australia's national interests when required, the statement said. China's diplomatic complaint isn't the first time Beijing has raised concerns about Australia's treatment of Chinese students. In the past 2 years, China's Ministry of Education has issued 2 safety warnings for Chinese students in Australia, including one citing successive vicious incidents of overseas students being attacked in many places in Australia, and another warning of more general risks of travel during the pandemic. The warnings came in a period when Beijing imposed trade bans or restrictions on various Australian exports, and were widely viewed as a potential economic threat to Australian universities that are heavily reliant on Chinese students. These latest accusations fall within a parameter of Chinese government attempts to falsely portray Australia as a highly dangerous place for Chinese students, said Alex Josky, an independent researcher who specializes in Chinese military activities in Western universities. The claims of unfair treatment from China's government also come amid increasing scrutiny of efforts by Chinese military-linked personnel to undertake research or acquire technologies from foreign universities. The Trump administration imposed restrictions on Chinese postgraduate students entering the United States due to concerns that students with military links are at high risk of being exploited or co-opted by the PRC authorities. While the details of this case are unclear, the Chinese military sends large numbers of its scientists to train and work at foreign universities, said Mr. Josky. Separately, university students are generally required to go through a short period of military training, he said.